Greetings, one and all. Chris Courtney here. A little bit of pre-show. Although, I got to be honest, it's a really light day. It's a really light day. Coming in after, it's like we had a lot of push yesterday on Labor Day. It's like things were in motion prior to Labor Day, and then Labor Day was kind of like a momentary, like, bloop, little break stoppage. But we do have Abby in here, and I wanted to make sure to take a second to go through Abby's work. So we'll probably do a proper feedback loop. But she's working through competitive research. And one of the first exercises in the UX course. And to be honest with you, I always geek out on UX research, and I really do enjoy. I really do enjoy going through and taking a look at how somebody else sees the world, which is what you really get anytime you jump into some sort of competitive research or analysis. And she's one of the cool things about that exercise is because the topic matter is meant to be wherever you happen to be. We're always looking at different competitors, and there's sites that I simply haven't looked at. Chelsea, when she was working through this exercise in Austin, Texas. Obviously, I'm not familiar with the Austin sports, like social sports scene. So we were looking at a lot of things there that were unique, and I always find it interesting to see how other areas are operating. But with all that said, let's go ahead and jump on in and take a peek at what Abby's got, and then we'll move forward. Greetings, one and all. Chris Courtney here, New Pragmatic. It's time for the feedback loop. Got a really light morning this morning, day after Labor Day. So we're going to jump in with Abby, who is working through her competitive analysis and really more competitive research. She hasn't quite gotten to the analysis phase of it yet. So let's go ahead. I'm going to share my screen so we can take a look at what she's got. So this is competitive research, exercise 4 here in the UX course. And as you get down here, you're provided with a competitive matrix, which I know she's created a copy of here. And basically, she's trying to look at competitors to her client, which is Active Weekends. Now, Active Weekends is trying to figure out, to catch those of you who aren't familiar with the exercise, or it's not really quite a fully, it's not a full project. It's like a mini project, to be honest with you. But the idea is that there's a client who's looking for assistance and trying to reposition their offerings. And part of the repositioning, it does involve taking a look at the competition and figuring out what people are doing to the right and left of you. So she first created this competitor list. Chicago Sports Social Club, S3 Leagues, Player Sports, Club Waka, all of these. She's got like 11 competitors, and she picked out 4 of these that she felt were most likely to be competitors to Active Weekends. This should have been based on the stakeholder. Basically, she's already done stakeholder interviews. She's done some observational research in the field, and then she also got a client brief. So she picked these competitors with those elements in mind. From there, she went through and drilled down on 4 of these: Hotshots Sports, Player Sports, Windy City Fuelhouse, and Zog Sports. Now, typically speaking, it's not quite. It should be primary and secondary competitors. So to get into these tertiary and quaternary, I don't necessarily know if this terminology really matters all too much. I just want to know who the primary is and who are the others. One thing that's interesting, though, in looking at this, you've picked Abby, you've picked out Hotshot Sports here as the primary competitor, but when I look at them, they are focused completely on school, and the if you go back to the client brief, the client's business, like a quarter of that business is schools. The rest of it is basically corporations and young adults. So I don't necessarily think this is the primary. I think this is actually a secondary. I think the primary is one of these others, probably this Windy City Fieldhouse, more so than Player Sports, because Windy City Fieldhouse has companies, adults, kids. Player Sports has young adults. So keep that breakdown in mind. Like these hit a portion of the business, where this one hits the entire business. And really, that's who your direct competitor is. Who your direct competitor is the company that has the profile of your customer base. And the secondary competitors have the profile of a part of your customer base. So that's something to always keep in mind as you're working through. But end of the day, that's why we do a competitor matrix. We can move these things around at will later. The big thing is to do the research. And provided that you're doing the research, it doesn't matter how we initially stack these things. So you've gone through and you've looked at the primary positioning statement, and really what we're trying to do here is figure out how is this company functioning amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And it says the primary positioning statement for this one is, hey, we're offering driveway private lessons. Now that sounds like a company that has definitely retuned itself for the current environment. We get down here and it says get in the game, grab your friends and coworkers, have registered for an upcoming league, all over the city. I don't see anything there related to COVID. This one just says too many things to click on, and this one says that the company has been acquired by another company. So in this case, on Zog Sports, I'd probably shift over and break down this Chicago Sport and Social Club instead of Zog Sports, because it's pretty clear that like that thing now belongs to another thing, and you should probably go look at the thing that just acquired it. So as we go over, we continue to look over. So competitive advantages here, because we've already looked at the target audience. I'm less concerned about like the pricing structure at this point, and I'm more concerned because remember the whole point of being the client bringing an agency in to help them is to figure out how they should repurpose their business model for COVID. Like what things should they offer? So here we've got work with schools to get kids involved, every sport imaginable, virtual classes, private classes. This is adult group social events. This is work, team building, corporate events, charity work. And then in the positioning statement says, or in not the positioning statement, but the summary, I'm not seeing a ton that focuses on like how they're adjusting. So I actually wanted to pull up the sites to see if we could see anything. And one thing I noticed right away with Windy City Fieldhouse is it's a pretty terrible site. Like, by all means, like, do not design anything like this in the course. If we come over, the other thing I noticed is in Firefox, it doesn't even load their logo, but in Chrome it does. But the site is just fundamentally broken. The colors are. This is an accessibility nightmare currently with these colors. So there's just a lot of not great things going on. But all that said, 9 holiday party ideas, including virtual and in-person options. They are, new virtual team building, real business ROIs, virtual event program, virtual scavenger, like virtual. This company, which is really built around these social activities, it's is gone all like there's three things on the homepage that are virtual. Okay, so you gotta be able to dig in and kind of look at what they're doing. It's sometimes it doesn't say COVID-19 specifically here, but it's still important to take in, even if the site is just not great. If we go over here to player sports, it's there's nothing up top that kind of guides you there, but right here they've got a banner. It says your safety is our priority. Please familiarize yourself with our health and safety protocols, and help hold your teammates accountable to follow them. Interesting wording there, because it sounds like, hey, here's our protocols. You basically watch yourselves, which is like not great. So, health and safety guidelines, roster and waiver required. This is interesting. Player sports group safety guidelines include the best practices for adult social sports. These were developed in consultation with CDC requirements, state and local guidelines, and input of the State and Social Industry Association. Be interesting to figure out what these guidelines are. That should be something that you are mentally noting. Okay, what are the CDC guidelines that they're referencing? What are the state and local guidelines? I would go look those up. You're going to want to mention those in your client discussion, okay? And, from here, and they've linked to them here, which is interesting. For more information, please visit current state Illinois guidelines for safely playing sports. And so here's interesting. They've got a breakdown of sports right here provided. Higher risk, medium risk, and lower risk. Think back to what your client called you in to do. Help us figure out what to offer, right? Well, this is a good way to go. And this is specifically focused on the market that you're in Chicago, or you're working from Chicago, and the whole purpose is figuring out what is most likely to be allowable in that space. Well, don't go do any boxing. It's high risk. Although I am blown away that like football seems to be out. Ultimate frisbee? Like, I get wrestling, but what is ultimate frisbee something different than what I thought it was? Anyway, what's interesting is you come over here and archery, badminton, baseball. I wouldn't have thought baseball was a lower risk sport, but I guess you throw the ball and you catch the ball with a glove. You do have to hold it at some point to throw it. But there's a number of sports here that I wasn't anticipating. Golf seems like a very low contact sport. But skateboarding, softball, softball and baseball, that I find that to be shocking. But this is where doing the research really comes into play, because you're going to discover things that might not have been obvious otherwise. And it is interesting with all the discussion of college football coming back, the higher risk, right there in the higher risk football. So be sure to reference those guidelines, and again, they link to them right away. So back to the matrix. You're asking, volunteer as coach, where is the contact info? These questions for future consideration, they really should be focused on how to address the company you're doing the research for, to what you've observed here. So you're in the area of what you're trying to glean out of the project, but you're not quite hitting it. Like you've done a lot of research, but I'm not seeing much about the actual, like, what these companies are doing related to COVID. I'm seeing what these companies do, which is great, but the whole purpose is like this is COVID related. Um, and I do see like this is something you picked up on, but you clearly scrolled right past the safety protocols that were here. So that's something that keep in mind. It's not just going through the matrix and answering these questions literally. And it's also do this while keeping in mind the primary goal of your client, which is to figure out what to do about COVID, because they don't want to like shutter their company. From there, we had also Hotshots, and Hotshots, another not great website. This type is really hard to read, and that's something that you'll get more into in the interface program. You're in the UX program right now, so that's fine. This driveway private lessons, I want to know more about them. Coach brings necessary equipment. Coach will. So what's interesting is it's a private one-on-one lesson. There's no social aspect of this, and that's really an interesting way to address COVID, but it gets away from the team building, the social aspect of the purpose of these organizations. So it invents a revenue stream that might keep it alive, but it also does the opposite of everything that we're seeing in these images, which everything that we're seeing in that image is not part of it. So online class offerings, let's see what that's like. Online class offering. So what do we got? Digital class schedule. Sports and more. Total sports. This is just kind of age groups. So essentially, they are offering some sort of, or they were offering. It looks like these are in the past. So maybe they just need to update their site. But it looks like they were offering, like, hey, you can get on a Skype, you can get on a, not a Skype call, but you can get on a Zoom call with us, and we will we'll guide you through these classes, because these are digital classes. So basketball, soccer. So I'm curious. Equipment needed. Yeah, you basically need everything, and then 4 to 6 place markers. So essentially, it's like skills. Like we'll teach you how to like weave in and out of markers, I guess. It's kind of interesting. It's interesting to see how they were trying to address this from a virtual mentality, and yeah, it just shows you. It shows you. I would have never even considered like that sort of quote virtual class, but that's what these companies are coming up with in the midst of COVID, and that ultimately is what you're looking for when you're doing this competitive study. Like what's everybody doing, and can I come up with something for my client that's going to be competitive or potentially beat that thing? That's what you're going for. Also, you did a heuristic study of the 4 sites, and this is something that I think allows you to dive in a little deeper, and kind of begin to build an understanding of how these sites are really working. Not just so yes, we're looking at what the product offerings are, but we're also looking at like, okay, so how do these sites work? Are they easy to use? Like I'm coming in as a user, I'm trying to to study these and try to, and a lot of users, they come in and they do competitive, they do comparison work. That's what competitive analysis really is. And it's like, visibility of system status. This, this Windy City Fieldhouse, we've talked about it. It's a terrible site. Versus, the others, which are much easier to utilize. Nav follows you as you scroll in the same ugly design way, but is usable if you click on the wrong page. Social media does not open in a new tab. So, you've got some good observations here. I feel like you're probably better for it, from the perspective of, you now understand these competitors better because you've studied them closer. But at the same time, like, it really comes back to the competitor matrix and making sure that we're still on target for what the stakeholder is needing, which is, how do I put a competitive offering out there for the fall season? And I think that's still, and I'm not quite seeing it here, but all the base work has been done to get you there. All right, so that's where we're going to wrap it up today. I think, Abby, I think you're definitely in the right realm. Even if you've not quite hit the mark on what you've observed, it's there. And I think Chicago, the site where they were linking to the Illinois and the local guidelines. I don't know if those were Illinois or Chicago, but they were linking to sport guidelines. Though that's the site that I would really pay the most attention to. They seem to be taking COVID the most serious. Although I will say that Windy City Fieldhouse, as terrible as their site was, they were the ones that had like offerings that looked like they were really thinking about, hey, how do we get people together? And a lot of it was virtual meetings and virtual this and virtual that, and it showed that they clearly are going all in on virtual offerings. I'd pay attention to both of those. Like, what do the guidelines say, and what are these virtual offerings, and is there some sort of mix of those two that could be beneficial to your client? That's where I would focus my attention. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Feedback Loop. I look forward to you're going to see a lot more projects coming through here in a couple of days. I'm guessing from the Ouija and Eve, as they continue to wrap up their portfolio work, and otherwise you'll see more from people like Chelsea and Abby and others. So Katie, gotta remember Katie as well. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Chris Courtney, New Pragmatic, and I'll see you later. Take care.